All right, man. Stefan, episode 2. We're still alive. What's going on?
That's right. What's up, Mo? What's going on, man?
Nothing much.
Yeah, man. Really excited about today. The last one we had last week was awesome. We're talking about the entrepreneurship, and this one talking about ownership or death, and I'm really excited about it, man. So you want to go ahead and introduce it?
Yeah, man. Ownership or death, the topic. We kind of teased the pod last week, and we talked about how we were going to discuss fear of death. But we were talking about it, and the reality of it is this is a show about entrepreneurship. So combining those two concepts, we kind of came up with the title with the idea of ownership or death, right? I know we've both been really excited all week to talk about this to everyone. And first of all, definitely want to say thank you for the day ones, for everyone who's kind of shown support so far with the podcast. We're going to continue to make it sharper, make it better, and make it something that's a reflection of the things that you want to hear and the things that you need to hear as it relates to entrepreneurship. So as it relates to fear of death and entrepreneurship and this concept of ownership or death, last week's episode was about introducing the concept of how important entrepreneurship is, that it's not an option, right? That we must have entrepreneurship going on because it's a if you love business, if you like to be engaged in business, if you have good ideas, start your own business because you can get out of the constructs of other people, start to build things your way and control things, right? Mm-hmm. Why is it important to do that? Mm-hmm. It's important to do that because you have to be able to build things that support you and your ideas and your ideology and the way that you think about things, right? Mm-hmm. So to state it plainly, we have to understand that everything as it relates to our people in this place in America and really globally at this point, right? There's a battle going on. We talked about the war, but the specific battle that entrepreneurship plays a part in is the battle for the right to control our own resources. So that means we're talking about the ability to be able to control land and the ability to be able to control means of production, which is really, that's what everybody's battling for, right? We see wars fought between countries. People talk about China, people talk about Russia. If you pay attention, what are they fighting for? Everybody's positioning and jockeying themselves around the world for land and production. Right. Of the things that come from that land, right?
And to be clear also, too, though, we're not talking about arms battle, right? Mm-hmm. We're not talking about guns, we're talking about violence, which is simply that the revolution of Black people needs to stop being reactive and we need to start building our own businesses.
Correct.
And being entrepreneurs. So let's be clear that we're not being aggressive in any way. We're using the word battle, we're using the word war to really shake people up and say that you need to approach this just like it is a battle. Okay, I think from the last podcast, people kind of like left off saying, oh man, this is like, something that I need to be violent about, but there's nothing violent about it. In the contrary, we just need to be affirmative about it and be understand that entrepreneurship, or what we're going to talk about today, ownership, is not something that you have a choice to do. Otherwise, we're going to perpetuate everything over and over. In 50, 100,000 years, we're going to be talking about the same things.
Correct.
We're going to be talking about the same way the civil rights movement did not get us anywhere. But today we're still talking about what Martin Luther King wanted and still didn't happen. So
yeah. Well, you know what? I tell you what, I think the civil rights movement, it got us somewhere. It just didn't get us where we wanted to be. It hadn't gotten us where we needed to be, right? And then I would say this, the reason this is we're even talking about the fear of death, and the reason we're talking about ownership or death is because historically, if you go ahead and check the receipts and you play back the tape, people get killed. What we talked about in the first episode about, we talked about there being a war and we talked about there being a battle, right? We talk about these things. We're not.
It's not gonna come from us. No. But we have to be ready.
We have to be ready
for the blowback.
Correct.
When you're doing nothing, nobody cares.
Nobody cares when you do
everything is good.
Right.
So because they have their foot on your neck already.
Mm-hmm.
So
they don't care.
But when you start to move around, so I see what you're saying.
It's a threat. And that's really what we introduced in the first podcast, which is to make sure that people understand. Hey, look, anytime you do anything that is productive, that leads towards ownership for you, control of either land or your own production, right? Because we produce, but we don't control our production.
No, we don't.
Right? Since we don't control our production, the dollars that we receive from our production are far less than the dollars that we give, or we're net consumer.
Yeah.
Right? You see what I mean? We can reverse it through entrepreneurship, which is at the core of what we're talking about. But understand that when you start to do that, and we're going to go through the history lesson of it, in the United States of America, when you start to try to control production, it is met with resistance of a violent nature. That's why we're saying we don't care. Give me ownership or give me death. right?
Right.
And so with that statement, understand that there is this war that we talk about, right? Specifically where entrepreneurship fits in is for the right to control your own resources. It's ownership. It's everything. With ownership, the first thing that you have to own is your mind, right?
Yes.
Like I've heard it said that the space between your ears is the most precious real estate in the world.
Sure.
That's the first thing that they own. At some point, we talk about education. It's probably going to be, we talked about this, it's probably going to be the next podcast. It's going to be education. We're going to talk about the importance of education and self-educating. But more so, whatever it is, whatever your agenda is, which our agenda is entrepreneurship, our agenda is our own progression, right? Progression of our people in the African diaspora, right? So if you're talking about that, then you have to understand that you have to teach people about the African diaspora. You have to teach people how to be a member of the African diaspora. Again, you got to teach your kids how to sit at our own table, at our table, right? As opposed to anybody.
Knowledge is the only gun you're gonna bring to the table. So
Correct.
self-education is something that's really important when you're talking about this.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, stating it plainly, like I said, the battle is straight up for the right to control your own resources, right? This is what everybody wants.
Yeah.
And to me, quite frankly, everybody should be able to control their own resources and control the means of production. The things, as in, if you are working towards the betterment of yourself, your family, your people. And you should be able to do that. And that shouldn't always have to, it just shoots up to the top of the ladder. It goes to people who control your production. And that just shouldn't happen, right? So there's no way to really explain it and get into it without getting into a little history lesson.
The history lesson, a little background. So we need to talk about where we came from, how things started, and then get to 2019.
Right.
Today.
Right.
Okay, let's go.
And so there's a little incident that took place a long time ago called Bacon's Rebellion that changed the game, right? And so we're going to include some information on this, definitely on YouTube. We'll try to get you a link wherever you can kind of access the pod, Twitter, things like that. Then make sure you guys can kind of check this information
And I never
out.
heard about it before, until you told me about it 2 days ago. I thought slaves had the same rights from the day they got here in the 1500s until it ended.
Until now.
Quote unquote, until now. Yeah, quote unquote, ended after the Civil War.
Right.
I thought America had a code for slaves. But from what I understand from the top, it's like, no, America did not have it together when it comes to having a set slave code.
And I've been saying this for a while. You have to understand that when you start to talk about the socioeconomic status of slaves, that status creates the bottom, right, of a caste system. When you talk about socioeconomics and capitalism, you're talking about a caste system, just like you see in India, just like you see in other places where you have society set up from the top to bottom.
Only difference is they call it that way.
They call it that way, right?
Yeah.
There's no hypocrisy to it. It is what it is. Everyone knows. In India, if you're born into a certain class, caste, right, which is class, we call it class here.
Right.
If you're born into a certain caste, that's where you're at.
Right.
And to be honest, there's been instances where people do transcend castes, right? They end up getting murdered. Like that happens in India, right? Because that's how ingrained this is into the society there, right? The English didn't have it. They didn't have a set way to treat or handle slaves yet. Well, the British colonies of Virginia and Maryland were founded. They not only brought in slaves, we know about Jamestown, right? Them bringing in slaves there. That's kind of the first place that slaves started to work in what would become the colonies, the 13 colonies, right? But you had at the same time the bringing in of indentured servants. So, but you've always heard that, white people were treated like slaves too at one point. They were indentured servants. You're absolutely right.
For a period of
time. Slaves and indentured servants were treated the same in that while indentured servants served a landowner, right, a plantation owner, master, if you will, for terms of like 7 to 14 years, you had slaves who would be slaves their entire lives. However, they could be freed. Either they could be freed in the will of their masters, or they could purchase their own freedom, or they could purchase family members' freedom. And so you did have a class of quote-unquote free blacks in the United States, in Virginia and Maryland at that time, right? And we're talking the 1600s. So we're talking the early 1600s into the late 1600s.
And they could, by the way, own arms once they were freed.
Correct.
They could employ whites.
Yep.
And slave owners had limited rights before those codes. But go on.
Correct, exactly. And so what you had was a situation where even indentured servants, they couldn't even get married. Like if you were an indentured servant, you couldn't get married at that time, right? And at this time in Virginia and Maryland, while there was plenty of tobacco, plenty of land to be had, you know what they didn't have? The most precious resource of all, white women. I'm just,
So
there wasn't enough white women to go around, right? And what was happening was you had these poor indentured servants who would get their freedom. You had these slaves, these black slaves who would get their freedom, and they were in the same rung in the social ladder. So they lived together, they worked together, lived in the same neighborhoods, faced the same opportunities. Once they were both freed, they had the same opportunities to do the same things, including marry white women, right? And apparently this was happening. You think brothers are getting white women now? Back in the day,
before that code,
hey man, the white women were choosing, man. The white women been choosing, all right? That's not new, all right?
The Virginia slave codes of 1705.
That's what happened, man.
No
they
way.
fucked the game up, all right? Because you know everybody's like, oh, you know, America's gonna be, everybody's gonna be brown one day. This was already happening. Right. Hey man,
he was topped.
Hey, listen, you got, you know, black man's been swinging that axe, cutting that tobacco for years. He's coming out the field, looking good. He's free. He's got some prospects.
Flat stomach.
Yeah. Right? A little buff. You know what I'm saying? Ready, healthy. Top of the game. And you got, you know, some rich white dude that's been hanging out, getting no sun. Right? Looking sick.
White,
looking rough. Getting sick. You know what I mean? Hey, a white woman's got to choose.
Yeah.
Nature takes over at that point.
That's right. So America would have been looking like South America right now.
Exactly.
If the Virginia slave code didn't happen.
It's been a lot more Brazilian looking.
Yeah, beautiful things, right? Oh man.
But Brazil's fucked up. But
now look.
Yeah.
Now look what we got.
Yeah, exactly. Look at this shit. Have you ever been to Virginia?
Shit, no.
I don't like the gene pool. That's a whole other conversation. But so anyway, so white women are choosing as they do, and you know, everybody's cool. You know what I mean? But what ends up happening is you got to understand what happens whenever marriages take place. I always say this. You know, you have to understand the institution of marriage. Marriage is a beautiful thing. Families are a beautiful thing.
Right.
But you have to understand who marriage ultimately benefits. That's why you have to understand that institution. Historically, marriage has always benefited men in Western society, in what we call European society. Why? Because a woman didn't have the rights to own land, couldn't vote, couldn't control her own wages.
She was property.
She was property in and of herself. Has been for a while.
Asset.
Yeah, an asset, right? Because what would happen? Her father might naturally leave her some land as a part of her inheritance. So who inherits that land? The husband does. The man does. So what happens if a black freedman marries a white woman in 1600s Virginia?
He benefits the same.
He gets the land, right?
Yeah.
So now what starts to happen? Now you start to have a situation where poor white people and former black slaves are starting to control land in the new world. Now, if I'm a powerful white dude and I see this happening, I'm not getting chose, right? And you're starting to see equality emerge from the poor classes, regardless of race, at a fast clip. Because there's so many of them, right? Their terms of indenture are ending quick, right? Slavery, cats are getting freed. People are getting money, so they're buying freedom for slaves, right? And then you have people who are already free.
And they know how to work.
And they're making kids, their kids are free, and apparently these white women are choosing the hell out of them.
That's right.
So what's starting to happen now, right? So you're starting to get a little ownership. At the beginning, 1600s, what would become America, you're starting to see blacks with ownership in the colonies, right? This was a problem. Not only blacks, but poor people. Let's be honest. Anybody who wasn't a rich white landowner getting land was a problem for those rich white landowners who were in control,
and
right?
Bacon was the leader of that. Easily became the leader of the group, of a large group.
Correct. Because why? Because they were pissed off.
Yeah.
Why? Because what started happening was they tried that shit on those white dudes, on those poor white dudes. So what they started to do is saying, hey, indentured servants can't get married. And then they started to pass laws that said, oh, you're indentured servant, you created a small crime, maybe like you were drunk in public or something like that. Okay, cool, boom. Now you've been arrested. And now we're going to add more time onto your indenture.
Sounds familiar.
Right? Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it does.
You mean unfair sentencing for crimes? Oh my God, there was a time when white people in America used to get sentenced like black people.
Wow.
Crazy, right? So what happened? They get mad, they get pissed off, right? And the same thing because these elite landowners,
right,
and the king of England was giving his land away to his peoples. Also sounds familiar.
Sounds
right?
familiar too.
Rich keep getting richer. So what happens? Dudes get pissed off because okay, now I'm free, but the only land that I can get is swampland. I can't do nothing here. Or the only land that I can get is up in the mountains somewhere where I gotta kill myself just to clear it to do anything, right? Come on, man. Like what are you leaving me with? You're taking all the good stuff. So they got mad. Right? Naturally, that aggression wasn't channeled in the right place at first. They started slaughtering natives.
Yeah, they did.
For a time. This is white and black.
Yeah.
They started slaughtering natives. They started to fight and rebel against. Right. They turned their rebellion led by Nathaniel Bacon, right? So he's a guy who said, hey man, we got to change this shit. We need to get ours. Yeah. Right? So they start to fight against the natives.
A white dude, by the way.
White dude.
Yeah.
Who was like...
Who led the first rebellion in America.
Because that happened, right? Hey, let me tell you something. To this day, if you try to withhold anything from a white person...
Yeah.
I did. This is an experiment. I want you the next time you just try to stop a white person. They will mess seriously.
You up, man.
They will
play
that
the
shit.
hell out of you, man.
That shit. White people in a traffic stop is serious. You're slowing them down.
Absolutely.
As a cop, they will light into a fucking police officer. So he wasn't playing it. He wasn't for it. He gathered up the disgruntled poor, whites and the disgruntled poor free blacks. They got together. They were like, "Fuck it, we'll take it from whoever we can." Mm-hmm. First, they tried to take it from natives, but then they got smart. The native is not your problem. Mm-hmm. The problem is the person who brought you over here, right? And said, okay, hey, you can do this and you can make a new life. Mm-hmm. You can make things happen. But then whenever you free, he hit you with the bait and switch. Mm-hmm. So now that you're free, you don't have any options. And they already started passing laws that said if you were an indentured servant, they were limiting the way that you could marry. Mm-hmm. They were limiting what you could do already, right? Now they're trying to add on and make it even worse. So he said, no go. So then they said, okay, well, you know what? The problem is not the natives. The problems are the elites. So they started to rebel, and they started to kill wealthy landowners. Mm-hmm. Now, you want to talk about a slave rebellion. It's not a slave. It might have been slaves involved, right? Mm-hmm. But when people don't have what they need to live the way they need to live, what do? They naturally resist entrepreneurship, ownership. That's what people seek. They want to control their own means of production. That's it. They don't want anybody else telling them how they have to live, right? So after this rebellion where these poor whites and poor blacks got together and started to say we're going to take things into our own hands, that's when the elite said what? No way. No way, right? Like, we got to figure out a way to get ahead of this thing, right?
We're not having that.
We're not having that, right? So then that's when we introduce to the concept of white, right? So what happens is they pass laws in the late 1600s that then restricts the movements of non-white people. Namely, that non-white people cannot marry white people. That white people and non-white people cannot be married. Now, they didn't say black. And they didn't define white. It's a very important point. White was never defined. But they meant British people. And then they meant all Europeans.
Right.
White.
Because at the time, there weren't necessarily all the different type of whites. Is that why? The Dutch weren't part of the game yet. The Germans weren't here yet. Is that maybe why?
No. So the reason why they went white was because of the fact that there were Dutch and there were German and there were people from
Holland. And they wanted to include all.
And they wanted to include all of them because again, these people were working. These people were gaining the rights to control their own land and things like that. They're working there because there's money to be made. Right. But again, if there's Dutch people, there's Dutch women. If there's German people, there's German women. And I mean, we saw what happened when the brothers went over there for World War II, right? They're choosing, right? So it's another means where poor people and black people can get land. And it's not controlled by the people who want to control everything. So what ends up happening is they start to pass these laws that restrict marriage. Now, you're going to see where this is followed up into statehood for many of the states, right? So this is just the beginning of it in the colonial times.
That's right.
Where they're saying white people and black people cannot be married. That cannot happen. And all of a sudden, by creating that law, now white exists.
Right.
And so from there, boom, overnight, white exists. And all of a sudden, now white people can move differently from black people. And thus you have your divide and conquer tactic in place. Right. White privilege is born.
Yes.
Because now, by everybody being put under the status of white, those same disgruntled British indentured servants, former indentured servants, those poor people now get better treatment under the law all of a sudden. And then you have subsequent laws that get passed, right?
So somebody like Bacon would never have happened if white privileges was there before.
Correct.
He would never emerge because he would have benefited from a lot of different rights. we can call them soft rights.
Correct.
You know,
I encourage people to read a book called The Wretched of the Earth by a man named Frantz Fannon. Great writer, great
from Guadeloupe.
Psychologist.
Yeah, it's a funny story. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, Frantz Fannon is good at. Break Frantz Fannon down for a second. Just educate.
Yeah, so he's a psychologist who's from Guadeloupe, but you know, because you're from Guadeloupe, Martinique, you are automatically a French person, right? Mm-hmm. So he got called in to go fight the war in Algeria, and as a psychologist, they say, hey, while you there, you know, write something about how crazy these guys are. You know, they have everything they need. Why they are fighting? Why they are doing the war?
Why do they hate us, man?
Why do they hate us so much? You know, and write about it and come right back, okay?
Right.
And he goes over there and he turned the whole thing around. He's like, no, you French people are crazy.
Because he told
these
the
guys
truth.
are right. And he joined the forces with them, started to write on their behalf against the French, and fought on the behalf of the Algerians. And the Algerians won the war. And the Algerians, until today, put this guy up on a pedestal.
Yes.
Okay, because he helped them with the war. Yeah, so yeah.
Because he defined their struggle with
That's
words.
Right. He did.
He's a great guy. So he wrote this book, The Wretched of the Earth, where he breaks down the concept of psychological colonialism. Mm-hmm. Colonialism cannot exist until it exists in the mind. Going back to why you have to control your mind. Because we're talking about things that happened in 1600s. Sounds like we're talking about last week.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's because this is the beginning. We're trying to show you where all this stuff comes from in the first place. Why you got to get up on your entrepreneurship game. Yeah. Because that idea you have is a weapon. That idea that you have is your best way of fighting back. Because it's going to give you the ability to own things. And once you own things, you're going to be able to counter this white privilege that got created in the late 1600s with a little privilege of your own.
That's right. That's right. You're going to be able to vote. You're going to have voting blocks. You're going to have power that nobody wants you to have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we start to see from the creation of these laws in 1680s, white privilege is established by the law. So second plain statement, in the foundational law of America, white privilege was established as a way of quelling rebellion.
Yes.
In the masses from the people. White privilege is the legal tool used in order to divide the people in such a way so that those in power can remain in power. White privilege, as defined in the law, in its writing and in its enforcement, is the way that white people were used to create what Frantz Fannon describes as a bourgeoisie class.
The philosophy of top to bottom.
Correct.
Haiti, like many other countries, follow the Anglo-Saxon way, which is, you know, you have the top, the middle, which is the military, and the bottom, which is the people.
Correct.
And then you need to have the top to push down on the bottom using the military in the middle. By the way, Chicken the Gia talks about that, talks about the white, the red, and the black. And by the way, white was never meant to be a color, according to him.
Correct.
White was just the top, the reds were the army, and the blacks were the bottom.
Yep.
Be any color.
Yes.
So that's digressing a little bit, but it's the same structure.
Right.
So talking about Haiti bourgeoisie, it's the same thing except that it's worse. I always say, you know, at least American bourgeoisie here, the way they kind of work, the politics, the way they work, Americans spend their money here.
Right.
Okay, they reinvest here.
Right.
In Haiti, there's a disconnect where they spend their money outside of Haiti for the most part.
It's even worse. It's even worse. Extreme.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you send your kid to school somewhere else, well, guess where they're gonna stay? They're gonna stay where they went to school. So a lot of times that's what happens. So we don't go back to Haiti.
The reason I bring this up is because this is the case anywhere there are black people in the world. In the world, this is the system that's been set up. You made a beautiful point. It's not white from the sense of biology. It's not white as in European. It's not necessarily black as in African. Right?
No, it's not.
What it really comes down to is a description. It is a legal description of how you describe people so that you can set up your socioeconomic status. And that is a good thing about the video. Again, we want you to check out that's in that YouTube description. She does a great job of breaking down the fact that white does not exist from a biological standpoint, never existed. These laws in Virginia and Maryland at that time in the late 1600s created white for the entire globe. It had never existed, but it was such a great model because it was so effective. Because by breaking things down in such a way where it was so visible to where people could visibly see a difference and then say, we're going to treat you better. They crafted what we call in the bourgeoisie class, but through white privilege, they crafted what we consider to be the race relations. Moving on. Here's what I want to say. Next plain statement. I want anybody who's listening, you need to understand one thing and one thing very, very firmly, okay? There is no such thing as white supremacy.
Right. And this is the first time and the last time we're going to talk about it. We're going to bury. Today's the day where we're going to erase that from the dictionary. By Monday, the edits will be complete and you will not find it.
White supremacy is a falsehood. It is not a thing. It is not an institution. It is not legally defined. So nowhere in the law of the United States does it say that a white man is superior to a black man. Right? Doesn't say that. So first of all, let's get that straight. There was a time, yes, where the law said that black people, slaves specifically, were 3/5 a human being, right? And there was also a time where it said that a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. But at no point did it ever say that white people in the United States are superior to black people within the United States. So there's no legal precedent for white supremacy.
Right.
There is no scientific evidence for white supremacy.
Right.
And there is no anecdotal evidence for white supremacy. There is nowhere where you can find that thing to be a reality. So the more you talk about it, that's the more power that you give to that. So now what we're breaking down to you is the existence of white privilege. That is real. That is in the law, right? All white supremacy is a justification for white privilege. As in, whenever someone points out to a white person, hey man, what's up with this? How come y'all don't go to jail for as long as we go to jail? How come you guys have access to certain things that we don't have access to? Why is it that you own more of your means of production than we do? Well, the answer is white supremacy, right? Because that's just the way it is and it's better. Or because you didn't do this and we did that. It's all bullshit. It's whatever bullshit reason or excuse that someone can come up with to say that white people deserve white privilege. That it was something that was earned. All white supremacy is an excuse. That's it. The thing about it is you're asking the wrong people in the first place. You're talking to the wrong people. It's like this, man. How can you possibly expect someone to give up privilege? And this is what we're at right now. So let's bring it forward and let's talk about how this is impacting our desire and ability to go out and think clearly. And create our own things. Have entrepreneurship popping in different aspects and different arenas, right? In order to not only create our own businesses, but to create our own industries. So right now, we can see this national conversation happening where you have black folks saying, hey man, you need to acknowledge the fact that white privilege exists. We need to have a conversation. You were telling me about a cat, man. What was this dude's name, man?
Brian Stevenson.
Okay.
The right-hand man of Obama. Today, so he'll be going out. Great speaker, though.
He can talk.
Speaker, he can talk, man.
Okay.
Oh man, you're mesmerized by the way he talks. But he's a right-hand man. He talks like Obama. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even better. So he's a great speaker.
That's high praise, my friend.
Yeah, he's a right-hand man of Obama right now. So every time you go on YouTube, we'll I don't know if we should put his thing. We're not
no.
We're not gonna.
No, you want to promote it?
We don't.
You don't want to give him any spins?
No, sir.
No streams?
No, but we will talk about it briefly here.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that people don't think we are just talking about something that doesn't exist, right? I mean, we're talking about today in 2019. Someone like Brian Stevenson is talking about. All what people need to do today is to change the narrative of racial differences, and then we will all be equal. That's what he says. And so we need to change the narrative. We don't need to change anything else.
Right.
Just the way we talk about race.
Don't change the laws.
Don't change the laws. The way we talk about race.
Don't change the way we enforce the laws.
No.
Don't change the education.
No.
We just need to change the way
the education that needs to be changed is the education of the white person. He needs to bend down. He needs to re-educate himself about that he has white privileges and that he needs to give up his white privileges. This is what he's teaching right now. He's preaching right now, going all over the world talking about it. And by the way, 90% of his audience is white. Makes you wonder, if you were talking about black people, about black issues, wouldn't you think that half and half, maybe the other half, 50% would be black, 50% would be white?
I would think so.
You would think so, right? But it would be so much easier to have the conversation we have right now, which is about ownership. But it's a conversation that I'm guessing he doesn't want to have for some odd reason. He wouldn't even have to be a great speaker to talk about ownership.
So let's get into why that's one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard. That's really stupid, in my opinion. That was I'm not trying to attack the man.
No.
He might have great intentions.
He's representing what Obama represented too. So when we're talking about him, we're not attacking Brian Stevenson. We're attacking the whole philosophy behind it, and we're like, okay, drop this, man, because this is not going to work. And by the way, the guy that you're trying to mimic, which is Martin Luther King, that's not what he wanted. Civil rights not what he wanted. A change in narrative is not the continuation of his fight either. The fight that he wanted is a revolution, in my opinion. He was cut short from doing it.
As James Baldwin said, the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, the race-based movements of the mid-20th century, 50s, 60s, that was a slave rebellion. That's what it was. This ain't a slave rebellion.
Yeah.
I've never heard of. Could you imagine if Nathaniel Bacon and them boys went up there and was like, "Hey guys, you can give up some of that privilege, man."
Yeah,
that's not how things
like undo your thinking and then give us some land.
We just
fuck you. You know what I'm saying? That's the answer he's getting, right? And not even realize.
And that's the thing that kills me, right? Listen, how can you ask someone to give up their privilege?
So you can get up on it.
So you can get up. Hey man, you got a lot of privilege. That's not what's up. Give me some. What? That's the most idiot. That is nonsensical. Okay. It's almost as nonsensical as white supremacy itself. It's baseless. It doesn't set you on a path to create anything.
Not at all. So today we say to white people who have white privileges, keep it.
Keep it.
Keep it.
Have it. I respect it.
Yeah, I respect it. Keep it. Don't give it up, because I think the assumption that he's making is there's no way as black people we have the means to get up and have our own privilege. That's the assumption that he's not saying. Correct. But he has no faith.
Correct.
That the black man and black women and our future children gonna have some kind of way to create their own little world of privileges.
Here's why. Because he knows subconsciously that when we start to do things and we start to build things, because history has proven this. It's not me saying this. I'm a student of history. You're a student of history, right? And we're students of business. That when enterprise enters into black hands, violence ensues. That's what happens.
And therefore, he would not have all these white people coming to his presentations.
Correct.
Because they would feel afraid.
Threat.
Okay? Because this podcast we're talking about here, listen, I was sharing this with my people and stuff. I couldn't share it with white people.
You can't.
I didn't even feel right doing that. Because it's somehow, I wasn't thinking too much about it. I was like, you know what? I got some good friends, I'm gonna send this to this. But all my white friends, I didn't send it. We're not saying anything threatening.
No.
All we're talking about is entrepreneurship.
But we recognize the fact that because privilege means so much. We look at what other people have in this country.
Right.
Privilege means so much to those people that when you start to talk about something that's talking about equality, it immediately rings bells that if black people have equality, even if they created it themselves, that is a threat to the privilege, because the privilege means everything, because the privilege is the very essence of being white. What's the point of being white if you don't have any privilege?
Life's gonna be hard.
Right, but let me ask you a question. What's the point of being anybody if you don't have any privilege? Whether given or created. And that's why we clearly see that no privilege is being given to us. So we're done with the conversation of anyone giving us privilege. It ain't gonna happen. There are no laws that grant privilege. Right? And there's no legal precedent of privilege. We can talk about affirmative action, but again, that in no way gives us control over our means of production. Stop it.
Another joke.
Stop it, right?
Affirmative action. I mean, as we see today, if you have money, you don't fucking need affirmative action. You need capital. Take it, wipe your ass with it, because all I need is capital. You can see capital can put you in any university you want. Harvard, USC is the one that they're picking on right now, but every school in America is doing it. You got money, you in. You don't have money, well, guess what? Too bad.
Yeah.
Okay? We're gonna put the affirmative action so we can have our 2% black people in there. Fuck that, man. You're trying to make me the quota. You know what I'm saying? So if we're trying to be real about this, we're talking about having capital in your hands.
That's it.
Because that will open doors for everything. We already know that though.
Yeah.
But we got people like this who are damping it. Take away our focus.
And they're further killing this dream of entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
They are telling me that if I hang in there, if I keep working for these people, if I keep giving up my ownership, if I keep giving up my means of production, if I keep moving out of my neighborhoods, if I keep diluting
things will change.
That things will change, right? If I keep diluting my path, right? The concoction, the mixture, the potion, the key to my uplift. If I keep watering it down, it'll get better. That doesn't make sense, sir. I disagree. That don't make no sense, man.
Sense. But I understand a brother's trying to sell tickets.
Hey, you got to sell those tickets. He's getting his money.
Yep.
He's getting his money. Yeah. I'm not mad at him. I don't respect that narrative. The thing that I get mad at is dumbass ideas. Yeah. Right? So again, you've been spending all your time, and I'm not talking about Brian Stevenson anymore. I'm talking about the collective. I'm talking about the average black person around the world.
Yep.
You've been spending your time fighting white supremacy. Something that's completely unfounded in by every way. They tried to invent IQ. Yeah. They tried to say IQ was some sort of measure of intelligence, which means some sort of measure. Understand what intelligence is. When people start to talk about intelligence and IQ, what they're saying is this number represents how fit you are to survive. That's what that means. So they try to use IQ as a justification for white privilege. Dismiss that shit. If someone with white privilege is creating a test to say, here's how we're going to measure your fitness to survive, what lens do you think they're looking at that through? Their own. All right then. So there is no test, there is no measuring stick on that says that white people are supreme to anybody else, right? So again, you've spent your time, black person, battling white supremacy, a ghost, instead of spending your time creating black privilege.
And by the way, talking about the blacks in Brazil, talking about the blacks in Argentina, talking about the blacks in places that you don't even think they're catching hell everywhere.
Everywhere.
We're talking about that, right? So what we're talking about here is just a microcosm of what's happening everywhere.
Correct.
Right? So in case people don't understand that, let's remind them about the Monroe Doctrine, which is another example of white privileges, which is saying that the Americans have the right today to tell the world who can come in the waters of Latin America, of the Caribbean, and therefore control the economy of this country because they cannot trade freely. So we're not going after that. Half the people don't even know about the Monroe Doctrine. That's even to today governing them. Basically saying that, you cannot trade with Russia. If it does, it's going to be a threat to America and we will attack them. Right? So we're not going after the Monroe Doctrine. We're going individually after one president after another. Today is Trump, tomorrow is somebody else. Yesterday was Obama, before it was Bush, and then so on and so forth. Going after their little policies, whereas the main elephant in the room in Latin America and the Caribbean in general is the Monroe Doctrine that's guiding the American policy to put their power onto all of us. So let's be clear, it's existent everywhere. So we all need to find out what are the white privileges that they are forcing us, because that's a quiet one. White supremacy is like a machine gun, and white privilege is a silencer. It's really quiet. It doesn't make a lot of noise. They write the law. They put the privileges for the people that need to know about it are going to know about it because they take advantage of it. So merchants, people that are doing business in that side of the world know about it and they care about it. So it's really relevant to them. But if it's hurting you, ironically, it's really silent. You don't even want to think about it.
But because that which is understood doesn't need to be explained. So I will say this for all races, for everyone on the face of this planet. Dumb people concern themselves with white supremacy. Smart people concern themselves with white laws.
Yes. With the laws.
With the law. Period. Right? Yeah. And so for us, this is why entrepreneurship and ownership are important to us. Because we believe that it's through entrepreneurship and ownership that, like you said, you can create a tax block. And when you create a tax block, you create a voting block. And when you create a voting block, you have a voice in the political process. That's what you do. And you affect the laws. And you do this on a global level. But it starts somewhere. It has to start with ownership and entrepreneurship first. If you own it, you control it. And within anything that you can control, you can create your own privilege. Right? Chinatown.
Yes.
You been to Chinatown in LA? You ever been to Chinatown in New York?
Going there tomorrow.
Yeah? Bro, you go to Chinatown here in Houston?
Yeah.
Bro, serious story. I was in Toronto, right? Now, Toronto has an amazing Chinatown. A lot of little restaurants, little shops or whatever. Like a real vibrant Chinatown, right? So I'm like, man, I want to try out, hit some of these shops. I just want to check. I've always heard about Toronto's Chinatown. Cool. So I go in there. Me and my girl, we pick out some food, right? Hungry as hell. So we ready to tear that up, right? And we go to pay, and the little Chinese lady points to the sign, cash only. So I got the food right there. I'm like, okay, just a second, let me go get some cash. Like the look on that Chinese woman's face when I don't know, I don't want to be that, I don't know what she said, right? I do not know what she said, but it wasn't good. Like it wasn't it wasn't like, okay, sugar, right? It wasn't like, okay, baby, you come right back. You know what I mean? No. It was like, fuck off, right? Like what? She took the food, she was getting ready to put it back. So of course I didn't return because I'm not about to spend my money with you when you have that kind of attitude. But I wasn't mad. Why? I'm black. I'm in Chinatown. I'm in your house, right? Yeah. I walked in your house.
That's right.
And asked you for some food.
That's right.
You react however you want.
You're a minority.
Take my money, right? I'm a minority. My will is not the common will there. It's Toronto. You know how many Jamaicans they got in Toronto? Yeah. I could have went to a Jamaican restaurant, but I decided to go to Chinatown and spend my money with them. Yes. So I can't get mad at that. Right. That lady behave how she wants. She can behave any way she wants to behave in her house. She owns that place.
Yeah, good for her.
Good for her. Good for her. I'm not mad at you.
Keep your privileges. Again, we're talking about this again.
You remember being a kid? Sometimes you go to somebody's house and their mama just mean.
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
And that's just how it is, you know? So this is an example of, I can't sit up here and worry about Chinese privilege while I'm in Chinatown. I'm in Chinatown.
Wasting your fucking time.
Right. So, hey, they control it. Their laws grant them privilege there because they govern themselves in the thing that they control and own. Right. So
I don't even need to know. I can only tell you the representative there is a Chinese
guy. Yeah. And for their politics, right? In regards to their constituency.
Right. They have the eyes on the prize.
They do. They understand powernomics at its finest. And so that's the point that I'm trying to get across. You cannot go into things that other people own and expect other people to bow to you.
White, Asian, doesn't matter who it is.
You bow.
You gotta create your own shit.
You bow.
That's right.
And you step and fetch because you don't own it.
That's right.
You work at the restaurant, you don't own the restaurant. That's why you all extra.
Fuck out of here.
Come on, man. Right? So, all right, moving forward. And this is why we get into it. You have to create your own black privilege any way that you can. And that's why we get back to buying with a purpose and buying black. This is why we talk about, first of all, build it. Build your own thing. Create that network with black entrepreneurs. That's what this show is about, to be honest with you.
That's right.
We're both entrepreneurs. Yeah. We know other entrepreneurs. There's plenty of black entrepreneurs out there. And we can only support. And there's other ways. So we kind of touched on this before in the other pod. Money's not the only way that you support.
Right.
It's important, but it's not the only way that you support. Support with your ideas. Right. Support with your business partner. Right. But there are other ways. You have to have your eyes on the prize. When you see a black business, be like, hey man, I do landscaping. I love to help you kind of take care of the place. I can run your networking, right? I got a couple of buddies who do that. Sync up your cameras and things like that. Now you're making money. Now they have a more efficiently running business. Why? Because you're thinking about what it could be instead of thinking about what it's not.
That's right.
It's a difference. It's a mindset. And this goes back to why. When we talk about why it is that we're looking for people to give up their privilege, right? It's because we're consumers.
Yes,
right?
100%.
It's because we're consumers. We're sitting up here fighting white supremacy instead of creating black ownership.
Yeah.
We're fighting white supremacy instead of creating black privilege. We produce every single day that we wake up.
Yeah.
Let's look at the music industry, right? We want to talk about just the word produce, right? We think about producing music. Look at the music industry. The talent is what drives the music.
Let me give you an example, man. Aretha Franklin, she passed away recently.
Yeah, man.
There's a movie that's about to come out. No. This one is legit.
Okay.
There was a producer who asked to follow her around while she's, just rehearsing. Right. She wasn't doing much. I mean, she was doing a lot. I mean, it's Aretha Franklin,
Right.
She's just a great human being. So just watching her go on a daily basis was a great thing. But he messed up. The video didn't match with the voice. So somehow it's all off. So he had the voice on one hand and he had the video on the other hand. And at the time there were no technology to bring it together until recently. They were able to sync the whole thing up together.
Right.
And a Jewish guy bought the rights to it. And Aretha Franklin family, like any other black person, were reactive about it. They sued. He won. He bought the rights. Correct. And he's laughing. He's like, I don't know why they're suing me for.
Yeah.
I got the rights to it. You could have bought the fucking rights yourself.
Right.
This whole time.
Right.
It wasn't available. I didn't steal it. I bought it. Another thing about we don't even look out for what we have. Aretha Franklin from Detroit, I believe she's from Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit, man. Yeah.
Her rights are bought by a Jewish guy, right? So not buying black, there's consequences to it. And then if this is not one, I don't know what is.
Which is a shame too, because Aretha Franklin's father. A lot of people don't know this, man. Aretha Franklin's father was active. He was an active dude. Reverend C.L. Franklin asked about it, right? He didn't play. He was all about black ownership. He was all about.
See that?
He was all about.
And this happens to his kid.
That's what happens.
That's what happens, man.
Period, man.
He's moving in his grave right now.
Because his what he was about didn't pass down through the generations, which we're going to talk about, right?
He didn't pass down to his own children,
apparently.
Because now they're suing. They're being reactive. Too late.
Oh, it's done already. So.
Now I bet you they're talking about white supremacy now.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is what they do. Yeah. This is what they do us. But you knew that already.
Yeah.
This is what anybody with common sense would do.
Yeah.
It's Aretha Franklin, man. That's worth something. You know it. You know it's worth
put your money together and buy the ride.
But I'm gonna tell you something, man. People aren't concerned about having their own privilege that they created. You want something for nothing. Why do you want something for nothing? Because you're a consumer. Because you don't understand the power of producing. You don't understand the power of controlling your own production. And when you don't have that, you're always looking for someone to give you something. Because they decide, when you don't control your own production, no matter how much money you're actually worth, they decide how much to give you and when to give it to you. Anybody listen to this, you work a corporate job. You'll probably be fired if you do this, but hey man, look, cool. You'll be joining the ranks of the entrepreneurs, right?
Right.
I challenge you to go to your HR director. Like, hey man, I need that next check a couple days early.
Look at that.
Right? You know I'm gonna work, you know I'm good for it. I got vacation days. You can take some of my vacation days. I need this check a few days early, right? Hell no. We don't really do that. We only cut the checks every 2 weeks. That's whenever the processing company, but they're gonna give you every excuse in the books, right?
Right.
Meanwhile, if you had that company card, you'd be able to swipe that wherever you want. But they can't give you your money when you want it, even though you earned it. You're the one that produced it. It's in your contract. It's in your contract that they determine, right? You sign that, right? That they determine when you get paid and how much you get paid. So, you know, whatever. The whole point is, when you get used to that, you get used to receiving things that you earned.
That you earned.
A portion of what you get used to receiving a portion of what it is that you deserve.
That's right.
When someone says they'll give it to you. So now you start looking for people to give you things instead of producing your own things. And when that happens, you become comfortable with that.
Yes.
And when that happens, you become adjusted to that. And so as a consumer, you are bowing at the altar of consumerism. And when you bow at the altar of consumerism, when people start to talk to you about productivity and production, when people start to talk to you about entrepreneurship, when that cousin that's always got a scheme or a dream is coming up to you saying, hey cuz, hey man, I'm thinking about doing this, I'm thinking about doing that, I'm looking at doing this, you think you have any interest in doing that? You look at him with disgust. If someone brings you an idea, it's usually because they have some respect for your mind.
Right.
They believe that you have a certain ability to do certain things. And instead of you stepping out and saying, you know what, you're right, I'm going to take advantage of my ability to do things. You get so caught up in that consumerism, you're like, you know what, nah, I'd rather spend my time working for peanuts, working for trinkets.
Because the marketing industry in America is 1/6 of the US GDP. It's $1 trillion business. You know, Nike has a new pair of sneakers every 6 weeks.
Wow.
They have a new line of sneakers coming out, so they have to spend money on that stuff. So you are going against that. So there's so much money.
Yep.
This podcast here, you know, it's a drop in the bucket.
Correct.
It's a drop in the ocean.
But it's our job.
It's our job. It's our job. So we're working against all that. So we're talking about all their resources now is tied up to this new Nike. All their resources is tied up to this really advanced washing machine that's gonna do the same thing as the simple washing machine with 3 buttons would have done to begin with.
So you own a moving company, so I know you see this a lot. This always trips me out, right? So it's like, hey man, you want a washer and dryer? It's like, not really.
Right.
But what's wrong with it? Nothing. We just got a new one.
The waste is amazing.
It's crazy.
I literally could furnish my whole house within a matter of 3 or 4 months with everything I need for the house. Because people buy too much and they end up wasting a lot of it when they're moving. Bunch of it, man. You know, people's money and mind are tied up.
That's a great point. You can't get discouraged, right? Whenever folks don't want to see the vision, don't want to see the dream, you got to keep plugging on because you got to understand what they're up against.
That's
like you said, there's a $1 trillion marketing scheme.
That's right.
That's playing against them. We're talking about globally, right? 1/6 of the GDP
of America
is on marketing.
Is on marketing.
Marketing's huge, man. So what you have to understand is what this marketing allows you to do is stay in that consumerism mindset. And what you start to figure out and you learn is that in reality, there's 2 cultures in the world. There's 2 cultures. Right? This is why I often find it interesting that when you see immigrants come to America, eventually they start to migrate to white culture. What we like to consider the American culture, which a lot of people will tell you the American culture is what? Consumerism. But when they start off, you see a lot of immigrants too, especially like Asian kids, man. Like Asian kids, I see a lot of Asian kids who gravitate towards black culture, right? And what they consider to be more soulful things. Because those things are closer to their original culture, the culture of their homeland. Those things are based on, in some way, community. And those things are based in some way on family. So in a lot of ways, they relate more like black folks, more like members of our African diaspora, right? In a lot of ways, until a certain point. And then they start to adopt the new culture.
Yeah, so it's if you don't get your eyes on the prize, if you don't really determine your focus, your goals, if you don't really like take it apart, like you got your insurance, you got this, you got that, you got your, all this stuff, because we are, it's a credit country.
Correct.
It's a country based on credit.
Correct.
It's not a country based on ownership.
Which is why
let's make sure we understand that.
Which is why they push you to buy things, to put you in a situation where when you make the purchases that matter,
that's right.
You buy them on credit, car,
and
house.
This country can be a credit based country, but we don't have to be like that.
Right.
We can create an island for ourselves within this country where we say, okay, I'm not going to own anything unless I actually own it.
Correct.
Okay. If you buy a house and 90% of the house owned by the bank, well, guess what, man? You don't own it. You're paying rent.
Right.
You're paying toward it. You're gonna build equity, but you may lose a house anytime.
Right.
Okay.
This is something I've seen in my travels. Places like, again, Belize, places like Jamaica, it's like this in the Dominican, where people will start a house, and if they run out of money, they own the land.
That's right.
They own the materials, right? They'll just stop building that house. So it's like unfinished houses everywhere.
Absolutely. That's the way my mom built her house.
Yeah.
And she ended up with a big castle at the end of the day,
Yeah.
After about 20 years, which is about the time, actually, she beat most people, in America. She didn't have a 30-year loan or anything. She built it over a period of 20 years.
But it took her 20 years.
Yeah, it took her 20 years. The same way it does here, too.
And she had this huge house that's hers after 20 years,
all the way.
Opposed to
all the way.
Where people are, 30 years.
My sister said, hey, I would like to come back home. Okay, I'll build you another house.
Right.
She built another one on top.
Yep.
Mother said, I want to move back in. She built another house for her. She was like, you have a house at the bottom, we got 2 houses on top.
Yep.
With no loans whatsoever.
At all, right?
Zero.
Just as she got the money, as she could put that money to the side. Okay, cool.
Right.
As we're going to add some doors now. We're going to add a roof now. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, this is the mindset. The mindset is you build it as you own it, right?
Yeah. So having a country that is based on credit is good for the country,
right?
Because it forces people to sell their mother,
correct,
to pay for the next house,
correct.
Not even to keep the house they have, to build a bigger house, and it just automatically.
Is it automatic, or does it go back to that marketing?
If you don't have your mindset
right,
and understand that there is a marketing machine that is worth $1 trillion that's coming after you, then you will give up.
Yes,
you will get that
because the reason you'll never truly own anything is because you don't own that mind of yours.
You don't. Exactly. Come back to the beginning of what we're talking about.
Exactly. Ownership is key to everything. Entrepreneurship is the physical action of ownership in production. Owning production. You can own land, you're not an entrepreneur, right? But we talk about entrepreneurship, we are talking about owning production. Own yourself, man.
Yep.
Don't give that to anybody else. Not immediately.
Yeah.
Not right away. Hold on to it in a way that is going to make a difference and have an impact for you, your family, and for your people. And the reason that this is so important, right, is because, again, when you start to understand that there's really only 2 cultures, then you start to understand, well, if the second culture, the new culture is consumerism, which is bullshit, then you start to understand that there's only really one culture.
The first one.
And then so it makes you think, just a second. These elite, we talk about the 1%, right? Let's do the math on that though. So to me, the biggest crock of bullshit that we get sold on is that only a handful of people control things, right? That's the thought, right? Oh, 1%. When people say 1%, you swear to God they said one person. Let's break this down for a second. If we're just talking about in America, a country where there's 300 million people, right?
Yeah.
If we were just talking about 1% of 300 million, what is that?
I think it's 250 million.
Okay, in America.
3.5 million.
3.5 million.
Yeah.
So think about that for a second, right? So if the 1% is 3.5 million people, that's a lot of people, man.
Yes.
And that means that all of those people are on the same page. They work together. That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because that's the only culture that there ever was. Power is not in the hand of the few. Power is always in the hands of the many. If the many are on the same page, you don't even need as many as you think you need. We don't need 35 million black
just
people.
3.5 million.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? We need our own 1%.
Yeah.
All we need is our own 1%.
Yeah.
If there's 35 million black people in the US, again, just using the US as an example, because we got 1 billion of us in the world, right? If there's 35 million black folks in the US and we had our own 1%, right?
Yeah.
What are we looking at?
350,000 people.
350,000 people. That's all it takes to be in a position where you control your own production.
Your own production.
Right?
That's not a lot.
Are there 350,000?
There are 350,000 PhDs,
Right.
black people.
Right.
I mean,
Come on.
probably 1 million
Right.
PhDs.
Think about that for a second,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We got what we need.
We got more than what we need.
You gotta own that mind,
gotta
right?
own
You gotta own that culture, right? You have to switch your culture back to the old culture. Again, the power that we see, the power structure that we see at the top is not 2 to 3 people.
Yes.
They are 3.5 million people.
Yes.
Right? You have to
Controlling
everything.
Yes.
Controlling everything. That's what you're up against, baby. You're not up against somebody that's extra smart or whatever. You up against a whole bunch of people. You're not up against a few geniuses. You're up against 3.5 million regular motherfuckers.
Yes.
That's what you up against.
Yes.
And so that's why I'm saying get on the same page. Instead of looking and being convinced, because consumerism and media teaches you the power of the individual. But throughout history, what have we learned? Individuals are weak.
What wins.
Community is what wins.
Absolutely.
Community is what wins.
Absolutely.
So get your community up.
Yes.
Get your entrepreneurship up.
Yes.
So you can get your ownership up.
Yes.
So you can get your community up.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
A token person of any bigger group will never be able to bring anybody up.
Right.
We need to all be, so this individuality that you're talking about, is missing a leg,
Right.
is your strong.
And the reason that you feel like these things that you want to do, these things that you need to do, are not going to go anywhere. The reason that we have guys like Brian Stevenson, who are telling us that we need to appeal to white people to give up privilege, right? Is because he thinks he's doing it alone. And that's what he has the power to do. He has the power to ask someone to give him something.
True.
That's the only thing you can do as an individual.
I didn't think about that.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Yes.
The reason I'm doing this podcast, I'll be honest, a business partner of mine, we worked in corporate together. And she said to me, man, you need to be talking to people, right? You need to talk to, you should be filling up auditoriums.
I told you that too, man.
Yeah, people say that, right? So her statement was, you could be speaking to auditoriums, 10,000 people.
Yes.
And I was like, hey, shouts out to Rhonda. Rhonda G, what up? I told her, I am talking to 10,000 people. Right now.
Amen.
Right now, I'm talking to you.
Amen.
I'm talking to 10,000 people.
Yes.
It's an idea.
Yes.
It's an idea. That's it.
Yes.
And if I'm true to this idea, this is the idea that every person I ever meet, I'll talk to. Right? And I say that. One person has the power of 10,000 people. If that person has the power to unite 10,000 people around a common goal.
Yeah, because he has 10,000 people.
Right. 10,000 of the wrong
people. So you can have a gymnasium full of people,
correct,
but none of them understand what you're talking about. So therefore, they cannot even act on what you're talking about. Whereas Wanda, most likely, will retain a lot of the things you were talking about and will apply it. And I know from talking to you, a lot of the things that opened my mind up, because you don't forget anything. If there's one quality that you have, you don't forget anything.
Always.
And so people read books, people read history, just like you do.
Yeah.
But they don't remember jack. You do.
Right.
That's the difference.
But that's what I'm saying. Again, it's a lot of pressure on anybody who wants to do anything.
Right.
To do anything alone.
Right. Absolutely.
Things such as remember. Something small, like just remembering some shit that you read, man.
Right.
But if you're having conversations, people help jog your memory. There's things in these conversations that we understand and we start to remember on the spot, and we can bring it here because we know that it has value. We can pull it up because we're in that spirit. We're in that mode. You can't exit it. You can't leave out of it. And so it's just important for us to make sure that we understand what culture it is that we're engaged in. We need to be engaged in the culture of community in every single way. We have to focus on making sure that community owns things and controls things. It's not about the individual entrepreneur, even though that in and of itself can be powerful because of the example that it sets. But it's not about the individual.
To quote what you said yesterday when we were talking about this, people at the top work like a big ass family.
That's it, man.
I'm quoting you, not like individuals.
Yeah.
And they sell us on the individuality, but they don't really believe in it. Togetherness is at the top.
This brother's taking notes.
Individuals at the bottom. They have collective power, and individuals don't.
That's real.
And so we go back.
I stand by that.
Yes, and that's a quote from you. I just wrote it down yesterday. But they're selling us on something else too. There's something else going on. So when you're saying buying black, a lot of people, whether they admit it or not, gonna say fuck that, because black people ain't do shit good.
Right.
You know, they're late all the fucking time. They don't do anything right. But their brain is reminding them of that stuff.
Yep.
Back to the $1 trillion marketing that's being put out.
That's
there,
it.
Right.
Understand. Just take a step outside of the brainwashing for a little bit. Just walk on that wild side for just a little bit, and you'll see it very clearly. Right. You're not getting anywhere. Right. Again, you're producing. But you're spinning your wheels for someone else. You're not getting anywhere. And that's my main concern, right?
Buying the purpose.
So that is why I say give me ownership or death, because I understand that with ownership will come violence. I get that. And I mean that very literally. I really honestly mean that. That I understand that the resistance gets real. If you don't believe me, again, we could do an entire episode about that. Nipsey, right? Look at that situation. But look at things like Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the National Guard came in and they leveled that place to the ground. Per capita, the most black millionaires, I think more millionaires than anywhere at the time, per capita in that place, black people were making money, right? The avatar, the icon for our Merchant Class podcast is a black gentleman who owned an oil well. His group, it was their second oil well, it says it on the sign, they were producing 3,000 barrels of oil a day. Come on. In Oklahoma, in the 20s. They ended all of that. And that's what I'm saying. You have to be ready, like you mentioned at the top of the podcast, because they're going to come, because that represents a threat. Get your mind right. You're afraid. So the other thing is there's different kinds of marketing. There's the marketing that you see from the news. There's the media marketing, right? They're showing us getting our heads kicked in for a reason. But they're not showing you got people who don't play that shit. There's places where there's police who know not to fuck with them dudes. Neighborhoods and cities and towns and things like that. The police know not to go through there and try that dumb shit, right? But you're not going to get them to tell that story. We need to tell that story.
That's right.
We need to embody that and do that, but then combine that with a bigger purpose.
Yes, and let's be clear too. This war will come from the outside.
Correct.
We're not the one who's going to do it. One and two, pitting minorities against minorities. You know, for some reason, when people come here, they just pit against each other.
Well,
and they pigeonhole themselves, you know, into their own groups.
Well, I think it's like this. I think people are going to work with people culturally similar to themselves.
True.
Right?
True.
And
true.
again,
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. Everyone from an immigrant standpoint, coming from where they're coming from, there's a sense of nationalism.
Right.
Homogenous populations. And we have homogenous populations, people tend to stick with that dynamic, right? It's easier for us to get money together, right? Again, if I'm opening up a Lebanese restaurant, do I need to waste my time marketing to the Chinese community?
No.
That's why you don't see a lot of Asian people in McDonald's ads. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why would you market to Asian people? They eat their own food.
That's
right.
Yeah.
So people understand.
And when you go there, it's not even the McDonald's anymore.
No.
It's not even the shit they're selling here. It's a totally different.
Completely different.
They sell rice.
At McDonald's, right?
McDonald's.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because you have to work within the construct of what you're given.
There you go. All right, good point.
And so that's what it is. That's what it really is. Understanding that you see that play out here. But even being in those insular communities, people get money together. I have Pakistani friends. I have Taiwanese, Chinese, Japanese friends. Not me, right? So I talk about these things. I talk to them about us one day working together. I talk about us doing things together. They're not interested in that shit.
Why?
They don't want to work with me, man. They like me as a person. They believe that I'm genuine. They believe that I'm passionate about the things that I talk about.
Right.
But why? Because ultimately, what would we build together?
Yeah.
Here's one. Shouts out to the homie Ben Teray. He's an accountant. You're an accountant. You're studying currently right now to become a CPA. Ben's got his CPA hustle going, so he's got his corporate job, which I am not against this at all.
Oh yeah.
Hey,
use your options.
Get that corporate money.
Hey, let's be clear. Yeah. It's not a zero-sum game.
Exactly right. And in that, Ben Teray has a thriving CPA business where he does a lot of CPA work for his network. Right. His network is black. He's a black guy. He does great work. People recommend him. I'd recommend him.
Right.
And he doesn't spend his time marketing outside of his black network because he knows already the story.
Yeah.
So me and Ben meet up in a coffee shop here in Houston. Coffee shop's owned by a Jordanian guy. He went to the guy and he told him what he did. He said he was a CPA. He's like, hey man, if you ever need any help with your books or anything like that, let me know. I'd love to extend my services. I like what you built here. He ran into him again. And he brought it up again. It's like, hey, offer still stands or whatever. And the dude was just like, I got somebody I'm thinking about using or whatever, right?
Yeah, right.
And of course, the person he was thinking about using is also Jordanian. Why would he ever think to use Ben?
Right.
Why? For what? He's got his people.
Right.
And Ben wasn't offended by that at all. Right. Because he knows, right? He knows, like, that's how things work. You have to be seeking out your own family. Like I've heard people say you always need to seek out your own tribe, but definitely you need to seek out your own family. Again, we talk about build your own 1%. Elijah Muhammad taught that there's no need to hate white people. Watch white people, observe them because they're successful in their endeavors, right?
That's
Try to see how they did it, right?
Right.
And what you had was a system and a situation where privilege was created. So create your own privilege. And again, when we talk about this old culture of family, community, power being in the collective, again, power being in the community, I want to reiterate, those in power are great in number. They're not as great in number as those without power, but they are great in number. And they work together. They are on the same page in order to maintain their power structure. Based on the population in America, for example, that would be 3.5 million people, right? So again, if there's 35 million of us, all we need is our 350,000.
Yeah,
right?
I never thought of it that way.
No, man.
Yeah.
Break it down.
That's nothing.
That's nothing. 350,000? That's a small city.
That's not even, we can even go a million.
Yeah. If we can begin to take over that piece of real estate. And that's why we do this, because our podcast is our way to battle against the tide of this mainstream media and mainstream marketing. It's our way to say, hey, yo, great things can come if you take over your mind again, right? If you allow these people not to convince you of certain narratives like white supremacy, not allow them to convince you of certain narratives like the power of the individual, because there is no power in individualism.
So now I see more and almost.
It is. Every power structure that you've ever seen is people.
It's people, man.
Like everybody, look, it wasn't Hitler, man.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Hitler, you know what I'm saying? Like, Hitler had a gang. Like, it was, he had his
bunch of
people.
Hitlers.
It's a bunch of Hitlers.
Yeah.
It wasn't one.
Yeah.
They just tell you about one.
Right.
Come on, man. And so, by controlling our own minds and living with principles based on a bigger picture of ownership, of controlling things ourselves, and the big picture of what can ultimately be built from that, we can decide what principles get passed down to subsequent generations, our children and our children's children. And it's crucial and it's important because somebody's gonna influence them.
Yes.
Wouldn't you want it to be you with something meaningful?
Yes.
Wouldn't you want to teach them the ways of the truth, the ways of the old culture?
Now, you're giving up the next episode now, man.
Okay.
Don't go too far now.
All right.
Because we're going to be talking about whose values are going to pass.
Oh, yeah.
To your kids.
Whose values, right?
Whose values.
And of course, we're always going to talk about this again from the entrepreneurial perspective.
Because what I found out, children are naturally entrepreneurs.
Yes, they are.
Naturally.
Yes, they are.
One of the teachers at her school made a mistake of asking me to talk. It was like 8 in the morning, really early in the morning, and he said, just say something about yourself. And I decided to turn it around and ask about them and what they wanted to do. in life, and there were about 15 kids, and I asked them individually what they wanted to do. None of them said they wanted to work for somebody else.
Right.
All of them wanted to have their own business. The 15th kid was Soraya, my own daughter, and I didn't get to her because
You already know.
time was out. So, but she didn't feel good about that. So the next day, she woke up at 8 in the morning. Dad, yesterday you didn't ask me what I wanted to do. I said, okay, baby, what do you want to do in the future? Okay, thank you for asking. I want to have a pet store in the back and also be a vet and just have both of them together. Their stories were legit business plans. You could tell this is not the first time they were thinking about it. At the moment I asked the question, they raised their hands and they had an answer for me right away. And this is what's funny too. One of them said he wants to have a prison where he can imprison people that bother people too much. And this guy, this dude was wearing a big glasses. You can tell he got picked on all the time.
Right.
And he wants to own and run a jail. That's what he wants to do. And the two boys next to him said, I knew you were going to say that. I knew it's what you wanted. So not only that he knew what he wanted, his friends next to him knew what he wanted. So they've been talking about it like their lunch break. But we don't listen to children too much. We don't go and sit down with them at lunchtime and see what the fuck they're talking about.
Well, I do want to point out, just really quickly, that your daughter attends a very amazing black private school where they are by far breeding black excellence.
Yes,
they're breeding the type of.
I didn't say that in there.
Yeah,
now I don't know. I don't know how it is with other schools.
Yeah, it's not like
and I suspect it is too, man. I suspect it is.
Maybe it is. Maybe
if you let them express themselves, because if this is what you get for breeding. Because what do they teach them over there? They don't teach them anything different. They just teach them confidence. They teach them that they are great, they're awesome, and they teach them about God. That's about it.
I'll break it down to you like this too. It's actually been proven that the odds for a child to be accepted into gifted and talented, for example, in a public school within America, as you would imagine, there's a large discrepancy between white children being accepted into gifted and talented, and black children being accepted, right? Unfortunately, right? But what's been found is that a black child with a black teacher is just as likely, and in instances more likely, to test at score, to have test scores that would deem them gifted and talented as compared to white kids.
Easy.
Who teaches you matters. That's the next episode. Again, we're going to get into that. That's next episode.
Man, you give me away, man.
But hey, man, who teaches you matters, man.
Yeah.
And how you're taught matters. And so, again, you got to teach your children about this big picture thing so they don't end up like Aretha Franklin's, family and, being reactionary and suing after the damage is already done, right?
We're done, right.
So, I want to tell a story to kind of wrap it up. It's a story about black privilege.
Say it, brother.
And about the mindset that we need to carry throughout life. So recently, we spent Easter holiday around family. So I'm hanging out with at a cousin's house, and we called over one cousin, came through, we're having a good time, having a couple drinks and laughing, talking our little shit, this and that.
Getting loose.
What family is all about, right?
Sure.
So it's about business. And so we're talking, we're chopping it up and cool. We hadn't seen him now. I hadn't seen this cousin but for our grandfather's funeral, right? And like when I was 4, right? So we're talking about 2 times I've seen this cousin in life. And we start to talk about our grandfather's legacy, right? Now, I'm saying grandfather, he's actually my uncle. Right. But the way our family's structured is kind of whatever. But he's the patriarch of the family, so I give him that title for the sake of the story. A lot of people don't know that my entire family down the lineage, I'm not new. Like, this isn't new at all. Like, what we're talking about, what we're about, whatever, this has always been passed down. I would, I like to quote Jay Electronica with some obnoxious slaves, And so, it's just the memoirs of an obnoxious slave.
Yeah, I like
that, at any rate, so we're talking about the legacy, and in talking about it, my cousin had some criticisms. He had some things that he wanted to get off his chest. I'm going to give you an idea of who the man was. He was a champion, not just for civil rights, because, and again, I'm going to point out, not everybody was involved in civil rights in the first place. So I don't shit on our forebears who did fight for civil rights because they were doing something that a lot of Negroes wasn't even thinking about touching. Right? Why? Yeah. Hey, they had that job. They had to clock in and clock out. Just like a lot of Negroes today.
Yes.
Got jobs. They got to clock in and clock out. So to get to it, he was a man who fought for civil rights, who fought for equal and fair treatment of laborers. When we start to talk about longshoremen, so my actual grandfather, his father, got him involved in it got him involved in labor disputes when he was a child, right? Trying to integrate the docks in Port Arthur, Texas, because there were black longshoremen, right? But they weren't treated equally. Yeah. Right, and they weren't treated fairly, right? Not only in the classic Jim Crow sense, but they weren't being paid the same. They didn't have the same rights and things like that, right? So he unionized the black laborers, the black longshoremen in Port Arthur, right? So that's where it kind of began for him as a child, right? And it goes back further than that. And so from there, he educated himself, right? Fought in World War II, came back, fought for civil rights for people. Fought for people to have the rights to jobs, to work in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Fought for our people to have the right to work in certain places, chemical plants. He fought for them to bring casinos there so there could be more jobs for the people, because there were no jobs in Lake Charles for our people. Making sure that he was fighting for social causes that would actually lead and benefit people. And he did this at a time.
Lake Charles looked like it's a place like that would have Ku Klux Klan.
Of course.
Even today.
Is it in the South? Like, yeah. No, the Klan is alive and well in places like Lake Charles.
So what he was doing, let's be clear, it wasn't.
But like I said,
without consequences.
It wasn't, right? And so, if anybody knows the man that I'm talking about, Dennis Ware, forever grateful. Yes. He had a big beard, right? And the reason he had that beard was because when he was doing his action, when he was out there involved, I mean, you don't think that he was threatened? You don't think that he was locked up? And on one of these occasions, somebody came to him, and he had a beard at the time. Someone came to him and said, hey, Dennis, I just wanted to let you know that they plan on killing you. Talking about the Klan. They plan on killing you. And they said specifically that if you see him, aim for the nigga with the beard, right? So he never cut that beard from that day on. Defiant, right? Obnoxious. And so he resisted in his way of resisting, right? And looking out for the people around him. He didn't believe in individualism, because as a family, we don't believe in individualism.
Right.
Not as a whole. And so he didn't believe in individualism, so he was looking out for his community. And to this day, right, the opportunities that he created last.
I went to his funeral. People were there. I mean, there was a long funeral. Yes, it was. Because people were coming down there telling stories of him coming and helping them out.
Correct.
And he didn't have to.
Nope.
You know.
No.
So I remember that funeral very well, man.
And he played his part, right? He's got a day named after him, you know, in that town. When he died, I was in college. And so my roommate at the time was from Lake Charles. I talked to him and said, hey, man, I'm going to Lake Charles for his funeral. Well, okay, well, who is that? You know, who is, what's his name, right? Yeah. Later on, he says, I asked my dad about your uncle. And he said, straight up, that was our Martin Luther King, right? So this is the legacy that the man left. This is the indelible mark that he left as a social activist, as a rabble-rouser, as an educated man, as a teacher, as a football coach, anything that he could to get to the youth and get to the people, to help them, to build them up. That's what he spent his life doing. It's the 50s and the 60s, man. First of all, everybody's poor, right? Especially black people. But whenever I'm talking to my cousin about his legacy, he tells me, nah, man, I'm not with all that. I don't believe in all of that. I'm like, what you mean? It's like, he should have took care of his family first. I'm like, what you talking about? He's like, they were struggling, man. He could have took care of his family first, then take care of the rest of that stuff. And I'm thinking, hold up. Now remember, this is his grandfather.
Yes.
This is my uncle.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
I know the stories. So my uncle's far older than my dad.
Right.
He's an uncle from another marriage. Right?
Yeah.
So their house burned down. My dad, right? So his father's house burned down. My uncle already had 6 kids in the 60s. My dad, it was 5 of them, 5 kids in the house. They took in 5 kids in addition to the 6 they already had. That's 11 kids and 2 adults. My uncle and my aunt in the house. Everybody ate. Everybody homework was taken care of. Everybody who came through that house is successful. Everybody. Not a bum in the mix.
We have a lawyer, a judge, actually. A judge.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which is interesting for my dear cousin who had this criticism. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I love my cousin, don't get me wrong. But the reality of it is, you're not around. I don't even see you. You don't want to be a part of the family. And it's so coincidental that you have this judgment of my uncle, of your grandfather. You hold this opinion that his legacy is somehow tainted because he didn't put his own individual family first. Which to me is crazy because you have 11 kids that came through that house. Only 6 were his own, so 6 that were his own, 5 were his brothers and sisters. Everybody was supported. What you mean he didn't take care of his family? Oh, they didn't have everything, right? They didn't have everything that you might want today, but they had everything that they needed.
Remember, you're against $1 trillion of marketing.
Exactly.
What he's talking about is you didn't have the things that he thinks today that he needed.
Correct.
Go on.
And so we get a little further in the conversation. And I explained to him, like, yo, this is the legacy that he left on that community. Like, this is very important. And his family's all right. Everyone's successful. Everybody ate. What are you talking about? He said, I remember growing up and riding with my grandfather in the van to go pick people up and sign them up to make sure that they had jobs. So now I'm real confused because I'm trying to figure out, yo, what are you complaining about? Again, it goes back to he could have did more for his own family.
But he knew that.
He knew what he was about.
Okay,
but he said that didn't matter because he didn't put his family first. So first of all, that's your judgment. Second of all, this is what he compared it to. He says, my other grandfather, when I wanted to start a business, I asked him for money. He wrote me a check for $20,000. No questions asked. And to him, in his mind, that made his grandfather the right, like rich dad, poor dad, right? That made him the smart grandfather. But the other grandfather, who left this mark on the lives of countless people, thousands of people, to this day, tens, hundreds of thousands of people at this point, right?
Right.
His way of doing things is not the right way because he didn't have the ability to cut you a check for $20,000. He couldn't do that for you. He wasn't great enough in his endeavors, or he didn't try to uplift his individual family. Bad. So check this out. My dear cousin gets busted back in the day with them pounds. Them pounds. Dang great. Mad.
Trouble.
A lot of weed.
In Lake Charles.
No, in Louisiana. A lot of weed. Let's just put it like this. Enough weed to sink a nigga.
What,
you see what I'm saying? Come on. Hey, come on. In Louisiana?
Yeah.
You getting busted with poundage? You driving? You on the road?
What you get?
Come on, man. You out. Honestly, for that much marijuana at that time in Louisiana, bro, you got to be looking at least 10 years.
10 years. Wow.
You got to be looking at least 10 years as a black man in Louisiana.
Sure.
Come on, man. Look at the incarceration rate.
Sure.
Look at how they sentence people in Louisiana.
So did he call his other grandpa for money to bail him out?
Hey,
is that what he did?
Hey, hold up.
Please tell me what he did.
That's what you would think, right? No. So that man whose legacy is tainted because he didn't take care of his family first, just so happened to have a son who was a judge.
Oh, right.
That grew up in that house, them 11 kids, to be a judge. Who do you think they called whenever he called to say, hey man, I got busted with whoop whoop? They called the judge. And guess who called in a favor? The judge. Call him Uncle Phil. Called in that favor. And guess who got your black ass out of 10 years in the penitentiary, right? On some Uncle Phil shit, right? Straight up. Your uncle came through, right? That man who was nurtured mentally, that man who was given the real culture, who was given that real culture, that family first, that people first. His little brother's son was locked up in jail for some dumb shit that he did. Call in a favor, get him out.
Yep.
That's black privilege.
That's black privilege. That's right. Amen.
That's black privilege.
Yeah.
When you run some shit,
yes,
and you can call in a favor,
yes,
and get somebody out of jail,
yes,
in Louisiana,
yes,
that's black privilege.
And that's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about. Where does black privilege come from? From that mindset.
Yes, yes.
The power is in the people.
We have it too.
It's a mentality. We have it too.
We have it too. Let's stop talking about it.
Let's just do it. Let's just be about it, right? Own some shit, control some shit, have some power, right? See, you can have the money to do something small, to do something on an individual level, right?
Yes.
But when you have the power to impact the lives of people, many, well, then people know who you are, and people know who you're about, and that power is so powerful that one of your children
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think the spirit of your grandfather is the one that's living on now.
Correct.
That's what's got into you right now.
You can't stop
the spirit
that.
Of him right now. And that's why you push for this podcast.
Well, because I'm not. I don't want to shit on my cousin, right? But is that business still alive? Right? Is he raising the next judge? I hope his children become that powerful. But where is the value? Where are the values of your children? What are you passing down to them?
It will die.
Yes, it
eventually.
will.
His spirit will be diluted eventually if we don't do anything about it.
Exactly. And the spirits of those like him. These stories are myriad. These stories are numerous across the entire world of people like him who have an impact on people.
And who have no name.
No name. We don't know.
He was not a Martin Luther King.
Nope.
He would never have been chosen to be Martin Luther King because of what he stood for, right? Because he was probably more bold. But he did probably more practical things on a local level. And that's where it matters.
Correct.
Don't think you can change the world. And that's another issue I have with a lot of, these guys, talking about let's change the world. How about you change your neighborhood?
Because here's the point. If people know Dennis Ware, then they know his children. Right? All those people that he helped, guess what they do? Vote. Guess how you get a judge in? Vote. Guess how you get your ass out of jail? The judge that those people voted in?
That's right. That's right.
Don't tell me about his legacy. Be about his legacy.
Yeah, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's it, man.
So man, what a great way to drop back and talk about you can have black privilege too.
Yes, you can.
It's not something that you need to be dissing. It's not something you need to be asking anybody to give up. Let them keep their black privilege. Let them keep their Chinese privilege. Let them keep whatever. Just get yours.
Get yours. And how do you get it? Ownership.
Amen.
And being about that ownership, right? Ownership or death, man.
Ownership or death, man.
Ownership or death.
Yeah. I think you give up a little bit of what we'll talk about, next, which is about educating our children.
That's it. And we're going to get into it, man. Practically. This next episode is going to be about how you can educate your children. We talked a lot about mindset today. Have the mindset that, you know what, man, I want my kids to have some privilege.
That's right.
If my kid makes a mistake, I want to be able to him to get a slap on the wrist too.
Every day.
That's it.
Every day. Why not? You get pulled over.
Because we get pulled over all the time.
That's right.
Imagine a world where we get pulled over and don't get shot.
Oh,
we can't fuck with him.
Or don't even get a ticket.
That can be a reality.
That can be a reality.
All we got to do is do the work.
So that one is exciting too. I can't wait to talk about it because we both got kids.
Yes, we do.
At an age, and we
are they bold?
They're bold, yeah. They're gonna get slapped if we won't fucking do something about it.
Exactly.
They're gonna have trouble.
Exactly.
Because they think right now they can do whatever they want, and we want them to keep thinking that.
Exactly
because
right.
It's gonna be in the benefit of everybody. At the end of the day, what we're talking about here is gonna be in the benefit of everybody. Yeah. Because imagine you have our 1% calling present, showing up.
Yep.
That's gonna benefit everybody.
Why
the 1% of Africa showing up.
That's it.
The 1%, everybody will benefit.
Right.
The idea of scarcity for them will be squashed.
It'll be gone because everybody's producing.
Everybody's producing.
That's it, man.
So it's all good for everybody. So we'll be talking about this and comments. Do we want people to leave comments?
Man, I need. So
on our show.
Listen.
What do we need, man?
These conversations are not just what Moses and Stefan talk about, you know what I'm saying, in an hour and a half on the podcast. These conversations are ongoing, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because the thing is, we need to be sharing ideas. Again, there are already entrepreneurs listening to this podcast.
Right.
One episode deep. This is the second episode. We already have entrepreneurs.
Hey, from yesterday, I think we double up on our people. We're like, what, 4? And we got 8.
Quit flexing,
we
man.
16 views and whatever.
Flexing, man.
Oh,
flexing,
man, I'm excited, man.
There's a lot of flexing. Damn.
But we need them to subscribe.
Yep.
We need them to like.
Yep.
And especially, we want them to comment.
Comment, man.
What we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. The more feedback we can get, the better our next show is going to be.
That's it.
And we'll give a shout out to you. We would really, really appreciate you.
Listen, find the podcast on YouTube if you're listening on Spotify or some other streaming service.
What's the name of the podcast again?
Podcast Merchant Class Podcast, baby.
MCP. That's
MCP,
right.
man.
Yeah.
I want you in the comment section. I'll be there. I'm watching it all day, right? I'm watching it. So disagree with us.
Yes.
Please show me why you're offended by some of the things that we say. The things we're students. We want to learn, right?
Yeah.
Tell us where concepts like ownership or death might not be the way.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be doing what the homie Brian Stevenson is doing and asking white people to give us some of their privilege.
That's right.
But I disagree.
Appreciate you wasted your time for an hour and a half. But really, really appreciate it. Hope you come back, you support, you forward this over to your family, to your friends, and comment.
That's it, man. So much. And as always, man, we love y'all.
Love
All right.
Y'all. Okay.
Peace.